So the reality is there's a lot of glamour associated, but you don't really see the other side, right? There's actually a lot of high incidence of problem gambling among professional gamblers. So you don't really see the other side of them, trying to get money from people, trying to borrow money, and the best poker players lose, right? Just the fact of the game that no matter how much skill is involved, ultimately gambling is about betting on something you don't have control over, right? That's the essence of gambling, unless you're cheating. Unless you're rigging the game, you never have 100% guarantee. But the problem with skills players is that they overestimate their skills and they underestimate chance. What happens is when they win, they attribute it to skills because I'm good, right? When they lose, what happens? Everybody else, right? It's because you came with me. It's because of this and because of that, right? I'm just having a bad day. Tomorrow will be, So that's what we're seeing, and with how many people can really be? How many people here can actually, let's say, be in the NBA? Raise your hand. So probably just a small fraction, right? And it's the same goes for poker players, right? Or other card games. It's a game of it's something that you have to practice, and it really takes a lot of commitment. And how many people can really make it into the pros, right? So, the reality is much, and for kids though, watching these people who yesterday were nobodies and today are are millionaires or winning tournaments, I think sometimes sends the wrong message because it gives the sense that I can do it. And when you play on the internet especially, what's something that's really harmful is these demo sites, right? You don't actually have to pay to play. You guys know that internet gambling is actually illegal, right? But you could play with credit to practice. And what research has found is that a lot of these practice sites have overinflated payout, meaning that when you play that, you actually have a higher chance of winning than if you're actually playing with real money. So can you think about what does that do for the psychology of a young person who's playing and who's idolizing these people on TV, right? On ESPN, right? ESPN is a sport. It further legitimizes the activity as a sport. And we're not here to say that gambling is bad per se, but for young people who are particularly vulnerable to developing addictions, there has to be a balance of protection and also freedom to participate, right?
Some folks also say that pool is a sport and bowling is a sport, so card playing may be a sport soon.
Is bowling a sport?
Yeah, I think it is. So is golf. Some golfers? No? Another question. Given that people are gambling, some have problem gambling issues and some are not. So for the clinician, Dr. Nguyen, what is problem gambling? How has it become a problem versus just regular playing?
Well, the DSM has pathological gambling's in the DSM, and there are 10 criteria.
What's a DSM?
It is a diagnostic statistical manual. It's made by the American Psychiatric Association, and they're the individuals that come together and things like major depression and etc. They print out these disorders and tell us what behaviors that someone needs to have and present in order to be classified under that. And so pathological gambling, there's 10. And the reason why I've been saying problem gambling is my research is with youth, and in the DSM, pathological gambling is only for adults. And there's individuals that have like these characteristics but may not have all 10. And so think of it as a spectrum, and I believe there was a slide earlier that had a spectrum of someone that's social gambling, and then problem, and then pathological. And the biggest things to think about with pathological is how much is it impacting the individual's life, like how much is it impacting their family life, their personal life, and their financial life. Whereas someone that's social is doing it more for entertainment, and they're going to work and they can socialize and have good family relationships at the same time.
About a year ago, I was working on a study that looks at how Asians actually respond to the actual the Southfolk gambling screen. It's a clinical scale that's based off DSM as well. What I found is that in terms of individual items they endorse that are indicative of severe problem gambling, those related to money tend to be it. If, for example, the item that if you look at a person and if you ask them, like, have you borrowed from a bookie? Have you borrowed from a financial institution? Have you written bad checks? Those people who endorse those items are your more severe problem gamblers.
Another question: say someone does have a problem, pathological gambling issue, and there's really not that many treatment places in the state. What can family members do?
There are Gamblers Anonymous groups in the state, but there actually aren't too many. But there are Gamblers Anonymous groups, and that's been a resource for some time. There are, as I mentioned earlier, the telephone helpline services, and in some ways that may be the most accessible and the most responsive for people who may be interested in getting some services, especially because, in my opinion anyway, because there's a sense of anonymity where you don't have to necessarily go in for face-to-face services, but you can talk to somebody on the phone and get counseling that way, because most of the time the person who needs the service is not that motivated to get the service, but their family members and loved ones are usually encouraging to do that. And I believe it is true that Nichols gets a lot of calls from the family members.
75%.
Yeah, but at the same time, those family members, they get some help in how to deal with the person with the problem. And then there are some face-to-face counseling services as well that many people choose to use once they understand that they have a problem.
1-800-GAMBLER is actually not a bad resource. I tried to call it myself, just so I can get a better understanding when I do my presentations, to give a better presentation. So when I tell the audience to call the number, I know what's going to happen. And when I called and I told them, okay, I have a friend that doesn't speak the language, what can I do? Or how can I help this friend? But before I did that, I actually tried to speak just Vietnamese to the people and to understand, okay, what are they going to do? What will happen? Well, during that test, the person who answered the phone was this very nice young lady. I mean, of course, I understood exactly whatever she was saying, but she had to pass it on to another person who, at that time, said that there really isn't anybody who speaks my language. And I tried to explain just to let them know that, okay, I speak Vietnamese, so that if there's anybody that can actually talk to me. But at the time, she didn't. And then after that part, I just told her, okay, I told her that it was just a test, just to see, okay, what will happen if somebody of Vietnamese or Chinese descent and whatnot, how can they get help if you can't understand me? And obviously, if I couldn't speak English, I wouldn't be able to understand you. How does someone get help? And she admitted that was one of the issues that they were working on trying to get somebody that's live. And so I think Wait, do you remember what the Office of Problem Gambling, what was her name? I think they were working on that too, where they were going to try to have somebody live.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure. But I also want to let you guys know that prior to last year, there were only 39 licensed approved providers in the state of California that were approved to provide treatment for problem gamblers. And through the Office of Problem Gambling, they have done several trainings for licensed professionals, and currently they have about 129 providers in about 10 to 12 different languages. So the numbers keep increasing because the issue appears to be much more prevalent. Now, I also want to be respectful of your time, so I want to ask one last provocative question. Asians got all kinds of problems, so who the hell should care about problem gambling? Is it really that big of a problem? Anybody?
In a survey conducted last decade, it is cited as the #1 community problem, even ahead of gangs and drugs. So on a community level, based of a survey in San Francisco, the consensus from the community is yes.
That's the Nico survey.
You heard it here first.
That's the Mike James thing read.
So I wanted to thank everybody, and if anybody has any shout-outs, please pass them down. I wanted to again thank everyone for coming to hear and learn about problem gambling or pathological gambling as an issue that is affecting the Asian American community.